I like SUVs. There you go, I've said it, and I don't mind admitting it. And if you count the Mini Countryman as an SUV, then there's currently 3 of them on my driveway, because there is the Mini, which we use locally, there is my BMW iX2, which is my long-term test car with AutoEV, and there's our Jeep Grand Cherokee, which is our large family car. Now, the reason that we have a Jeep Grand Cherokee is, well, it's our second one, and we really like them. They're big, they're kind of chunky. My wife likes the kind of high up driving position with them. They're practical, they can get everything in them. We use it for going away on holiday to across the west coast of France, or down to Cornwall, or up to Scotland to see my mum. My daughter and I like cycling, we can get our bikes in it, we can get the dog in it. It just does everything that we need to do. But it's from a brand that, dare I suggest, is slightly less pretentious than Land Rover seems to have become. And this is coming from someone who used to be a Land Rover owner. But it is quite big. That's the downside with it, and that's why we've got the Mini. So for local running around, we use the Mini for, for parking in sort of like, the multi-storey car parks, or for taking my daughter around locally to see her friends and things like that. So what can Jeep do? Because of course they've got this reputation of building these big chunky off-roaders to attract new people into their brand that maybe don't want the kind of big brash American way of life that up until now that's all they seem to have offered. Well, they can start by downsizing, and with this Jeep they certainly have. Welcome to this week's new car review. Welcome to the Jeep Avenger. Please sit yourself down, make yourself comfortable in the house of cars. Now, before I get started on this week's new car review on Jeep's new Avenger, would you be so kind to make sure that you are subscribed to the House of Cars channel? It's quite a new channel, so I'd really appreciate your support if you could make sure you're subscribed to it. Once you've done that, press the bell button down below, because that's the way you get notified when my next video is uploaded and it's gone live. And if you do enjoy the video after you've watched it, then give it a thumbs up, and of course don't forget, leave me your comments down below. Let me know what you think about the cars I review, such as the Jeep Avenger, and of course on the channel as a whole. So where does the Jeep Avenger sort of sit? Why does Jeep have this car? Well, let me just sort of briefly explain to you. Jeep as a brand is obviously very, very well known in the US. Its home market is very, very popular there. And it's relatively popular in the UK, but as I say, it's its smaller stuff that it's never really kind of taken off with. It's had small cars before throughout its range, but they've never really kind of caught the imagination. It tends to be, when you say Jeep, you always think of the Wrangler, or maybe the like we have. So it really needs to sort of like broaden its appeal. Now, believe it or not, in Europe, 1 in 5 new cars sold today is a B segment SUV. Now that's the really, really small SUVs, and that's exactly where the Avenger sits in the marketplace. Now, Jeep is part of Stellantis Group, which also incorporates manufacturers such as Peugeot, Citroën, Fiat, Vauxhall, Lancia, Maserati, those kind of things. So it is able to sort of like draw on those other manufacturers to help it with platforms and equipment. And so therefore the Avenger sits on the ECMP2 platform, which it shares with the Fiat 600, the sort of 4-door compact SUV that Fiat produce. It also sits on the same platform as the Peugeot E2008. So it is a very, very small car, but it's even smaller than those cars, because believe it or not, the actual floor plan of the Jeep Avenger is the same as a Vauxhall Corsa or a Volkswagen Polo. So what we're talking about here is a super mini size of Jeep. Is that going to work? Time to put it through the House of Cars road test review and find out. But before we move on, let's take a look at the main points about the Jeep Avenger. Now, whilst it does sit on the new Stellantis eCMP2 platform, over 60% of the components used are actually unique to Jeep. As I said, it's a compact B-segment SUV that sits below the brand's current Renegade model. The Avenger is available with the choice of either petrol, hybrid or fully electric drivetrains. The 1.2 3-cylinder turbocharged engine in this car produces just 100 brake horsepower and delivers drive to the front wheels via a 6-speed manual gearbox only. And it's available in 3 trim levels offered in the UK, with prices starting at £23,859 and going up to £39,600 for the range-topping Summit electric model. Now, since its launch, the Jeep Avenger has won numerous awards, including the 2023 European Car of the Year award, and it was also the best urban electric car in the 2023 AutoEV awards. So there's some big awards being given to this car, but that was for the electric model, bear in mind. How are we going to get on with this with just a 1.2 3-cylinder turbocharged engine driving front wheels only? Is it going to feel like a proper Jeep? Well, of course, it's down to a Jeep owner to put it to the test and find out. Right, first things first, let's look at the styling of the car, because it has to look like a Jeep, so it has to fit with the brand, dare I suggest. And I think it does. I think it looks like a great looking little car, in fairness. Jeep has its own kind of signature across the front end, and it's the 7-slot grille. You'll see that across all the models. Although these aren't actually grills, these are just filled in kind of blocks of plastic across here. And as I say, that's what you get on the electric model. Now, there's no way you can tell the electric model from this or the hybrid, save for the fact this one has the exhaust pipe in the back and it doesn't have a little E badge on it, which I think is on the grille on the electric model and also on the back tailgate. But that's it. There's no other ways of sort of like telling apart. But I love the way that it looks. And of course, what you can do with Jeep, a bit like you can with Mini, is you can personalise it a little bit. So you can have graphics that go on these kind of blocks as well if you want that type of thing. There's loads of little Easter eggs around the car that my daughter was out kind of spotting the other day, and I'll show you a couple of them as we go around it. Nice kind of split headlamp treatment here. So of course you get your DRLs, your turn indicators at the top here, and then your main sort of like lights down in there. It gives it quite a kind of chunky, aggressive look. But as I say, it's not really until you get up close to it you realise how small this car is. There's a chap's Vauxhall Corsa that's sitting just over behind where the camera is, and genuinely, it's pretty much the same size. That's the type of car we're talking about. And parked on our driveway next to our Grand Cherokee, it's absolutely dwarfed by it. You get cooling down at the bottom, down here, and there's also sort of like a little kind of radar sensor here, which is quite nice. It's got the imprint of a compass in it here, which I do quite like. See, that's one of the things that I mean. It's got these little kind of bits around it that are quite nice. You also get the little kind of Jeep, sort of like, you know, 7-slot kind of Wrangler front end in this kind of grille area here, which I do quite like as well. And then obviously I say all your cooling's down there, kind of chunky plastic kind of skid plates at the bottom. But yeah, it's certainly from the front got the look of a Jeep so far, but let's see what the rest of it looks like. Now, as you walk around the side, you start to realise actually how small the car really is. As I say, remember, 4 metres, just over 4 metres in length, so it is a very, very small car, but the wheels are pushed right out to sort of like the extremities of it, so you get a good approach and departure angles and then breakover angle as well. Now, you can't get the standard sort of like petrol or the electric one with all-wheel drive. There is a 4xe or 4xe, however Jeep call it, but that's a mild hybrid model. But that's for another day. We'll talk about that. If you want 4-wheel drive on the Jeep Avenger, that's the model you have to buy. You can't get it in this basic 1.2, but still it is a Jeep, so there has to be some sort of like nod towards off-road driving, and that's exactly what you get. Of course, you get your kind of squared off wheel arches. You get your flared wheel arches as well, so much like the Wrangler has, with the kind of sort of like separate wheel arches that go across the wheels. If you were to take these off, if you were to take these extensions off, the wheels would actually sit slightly proud of that. So like the Wrangler, the wheel arch kind of covers the front and the rear wheels. You've got some nice plastic cladding down at the bottom, again, as I say, over kind of breakover angle, so that, you know, going through, I don't know, down maybe kind of, I don't know, sort of like farm tracks or something down to your house, where the grip's not so important, but you're going to get scratched up with lots of like low brambles and bushes and stuff, so there's certainly protection in the lower half as well. And as you kind of open the door, he says, with the car locked, most of it kind of comes down. It doesn't go right underneath the sill, but most of it's there. So there's a little bit of protection down this side from the doors. Obviously you get your big chunky door handle on the front door, but the rear handle is hidden up in this C-pillar up here that's very popular with car manufacturers. I'll never understand why, but that's where it is up there. And of course you get a petrol flap here. Nice kind of squat back into the car. So as I say, look at that rear overhang. There's hardly anything there. I mean, it is literally, you know, a hand span, not even that, of a rear overhang, and the same at the front. So as I say, if you do need to sort of like venture off the tarmac, then you're probably not going to get stuck with it. Yeah, it's certainly starting to look like a proper Jeep, isn't it? Now around the back, again, proper Jeep kind of styling cues. You get your kind of lozenge style tail lights with the X motif in them. Now that X motif we saw originally on the Renegade, and it's designed to sort of like look like the X that's imprinted on a sort of like, you know, a military style kind of petrol can, those big you know, sort of like metal petrol cans. That's where that comes from. And within that, you've also, again, like the front grille, you've got the little kind of Jeep headlights with a 7-slot grille in them as well. The other little Easter egg that's around here that I like is the kind of Rocky Mountain range above the rear wiper spindle. I quite like that. My daughter spent ages going around it the other day trying to find them. There's another one on the top there. There's not just on the 18-inch wheels, there's a little ladybird on the roof, and there's another one in the front window with a guy, a little boy looking through a looking glass. So all these little things that are around it that's quite cool and just a bit different. And you get a big Jeep badge here, like our Grand Cherokee, just below kind of the rear wiper area here. A reverse camera tucked up underneath there. High level brake light mounted in the rear spoiler. Now again, we mentioned the kind of short rear overhang, and you can see it here, and of course you've got this big plastic bumper. Now the reason why Jeep have gone for these kind of plastic look bumpers is obviously, you know, from the point of view of if the car's going to go down sort of like, as I say, sort of like, you know, forest tracks or whatever, or farm tracks or whatever, and get scratched up, then of course you're not having to paint metal body panels. They're trying to be practical, so they're giving it a rugged sort of like off-road look, but also being practical. And especially when you think about it being more of an urban centric Jeep, when you think about parking, that's going to be quite handy having those kind of plastic bumpers rather than painted ones. So look, when we talk about the styling of the car, I'm going to stand here and say that I think it's very much looks like a Jeep. It sits in the range very well. It reminds me of certain elements of my Grand Cherokee. As I say, there's other elements of the Jeep models, both past and present. You know, the X motif and the lights, that type of thing. The, you know, the big Jeep badge there. Just the kind of chunky, squat look about it, the flared wheel arches. So to me, it looks like a proper Jeep. It looks like it should have the Jeep badge on it. But what do you think? Is it something that would tempt you away from a brand that you would normally buy this sort of smallish type of SUV from? You know, Peugeot, Fiat, Vauxhall? Would you plump for a Jeep instead? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Now, boot space is 355 litres, and you access it via, obviously, this electric tailgate. And if it's got a standard 60-40 split rear seat, and if you fold those down, that will take the total capacity up to 1,053 litres. So it's pretty decent, again, for such a small car. You know, it's roughly the same sort of size as a C-segment hatchback, so even sort of things like, you know, the MG4, Volkswagen Golf, those type of cars, it's similar sort of boot space to those. Initially, it looks quite shallow, but you do have a movable boot floor, so you can actually take that boot floor out and drop it down a level. So you can either have underfloor storage, or you can drop the boot floor down a little bit. And if you do that, then you can actually get a reasonable amount of kit in it. So there's a sort of largish suitcase. There's another large suitcase there. And there's plenty of room down the side where we could get, you know, sort of like rucksacks or soft bags down as well. So there's plenty of space in there for most people's needs. Certainly prams and pushchairs and that type of thing, you know, you're going to get into the boot without too much of a problem. It is quite a high load, that's the one thing I will say, you know, but again, it's a sort of SUV, so what do you expect? Again, like the bumpers though, you've got plastic around the back here, so you're pulling stuff over the rear bumper, you know, or lifting chairs, push chairs out, or wheelchairs out and things like that. It doesn't matter, it's just plastic here, so it's not chrome bits that are all going to get scuffed and scratched and that type of thing. So again, it's the practical stuff that Jeep have thought about. You get still little things as well. There's a couple of hooks just to either side there, again, just for hanging bags on, if that's your kind of thing. But as I say, that movable boot floor, you can obviously move that up and you can hide things on below that as well. So yeah, in terms of its practicality, I'd say boot space is pretty much what you'd expect for this size of car, if not a little bit better. Where it does struggle, however, is back here. Now that's my driving position, and I am 5'8". Now I can sit behind myself. I've got to push these headrests up, but I can sit behind myself. There's plenty of feet room underneath the seat, and just you know, my knees are clear. There's gaps there between me and the back of the front seat. However, my wife is closer to the 6 foot mark, and she's got really long legs. So if she's been driving this car just recently, so if she pushed us, I couldn't sit behind her. Now I know it's a B segment car, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that, you know, Jeep should have put much more accommodation in it, of course not, but I'm just saying be aware of that. So if it's mostly a tall driver that's going to be in it, fitting anyone adult size behind is going to be a little bit of, you know, a tight push. Also as well, the doors, the aperture isn't hugely wide, so if you're of limited mobility, just watch that getting in and out, and they don't open up maybe as wide as I'd maybe like them to. Other than that, what can you say about the back of this, back in here? Well, it's okay in some respects. Certainly for kids, it's absolutely fine. When I first drove the Avenger, the electric one in AutoEV, it didn't have any connectivity in the back. Now there's a USB-C port there, I see. So that's also been added since I last drove an Avenger. But you do get a raised transmission tunnel, obviously, because it's an internal combustion engine car. So a third person in the middle here, despite there being a belt, is going to be tight. There's also mat pockets on the backs of the seats, but there isn't a centre armrest, nor is there any door bins. So your kids that are carrying water bottles around with them, you know, like my daughter does, she doesn't go anywhere without a big water bottle. There's nowhere for her to put it. So that's a little bit of a missing thing as far as I'm concerned. You know, for kids in the back, they should have be able to put their water bottles in here. She's obviously onto a booster seat now, but there is ISOFIX points, but unfortunately they are behind these stupid zips. I hate Stellantis the way they do this. They conceal the ISOFIX point, these zips. These will break without doubt. We don't know why they are. They don't just leave them exposed or just have plastic covers on them. These zips are a silly idea as far as I'm concerned. Really silly. Headroom's good, however, though, because obviously, you know, you've got a long roof that doesn't kind of slope down at the back. It goes all the way back to the car. So headroom is excellent. As I say, I know I'm not exactly tall, but I would think even somebody of 6 foot, as long as they didn't have a tall driver or they were on that side, they'd still find it okay, but as long as you get the rear head restraints up. So rear accommodation is all right. As I say, it's probably designed primarily for kids. There's no getting away from that. I think taller adults, or as I say, adults with limited mobility, you're going to struggle a little bit back here. But it's such a shame that they've just not thought about it a little bit more in terms of the family kind of way. You know, maybe not so much big door bins, but at least a door bin to put a water bottle in, or an armrest where they've got cup holders where they can stick their water bottles in. But at least there is at least one USB port for connectivity. So I'll give it a 5 out of 10 for rear accommodation. Good, but could be better. Right, up front, what have we got? Well, actually, I'm quite impressed with the interior of the little Avenger. I like it up here. The only thing I will say in terms of the plastics, now my Grand Cherokee is hardly the epitome of, you know, sort of like, you know, sort of like plush plastics. You know, there is a lot of plasticky bits in it. However, you know, again, like the Grand Cherokee, they are well screwed together. But you do feel like there are kind of, there are kind of cheaper plastics around, kind of scratchier plastics. It'd be nice maybe to see something like that being a bit more kind of that rubber feel up there, and the same to the tops of the doors, that type of thing. You know, maybe a little bit of padded sort of like upholstery on the doors, you know, same as this maybe up there. That's the only thing I would say. But in terms of its functionality, I think it works really well. Now you get a 10-inch infotainment screen that's mounted up here. Now there's everything pretty much is controlled through the screen. However, you do have physical buttons, which I'll talk about in a second. And apologies if you can hear the fan blowing. It's a really hot day today and I'm filming inside the car, which has been sitting in the sun. So it's currently showing 31 degrees, which I'm not sure it is, but it's probably not far off it. Right, so this screen here, the only thing I'll say about this is it's a bit, you know, it's a bit laggy. Just, you know, come on, do you know what I mean? It's not a problem, it's just you've got to wait for it to move. That's the thing. So you get the 3 kind of screens there. So you get your media with your climate control screen there. Move across, then you get your sat nav screen, and then move across again, and then there's all your bits. So for climate, media, advanced driver assistance systems, mirroring, you obviously get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, phone options, seats. If it's got heated seats, driver and passenger. I don't need them today, but they're in that screen. Now that's my kind of slight bugbear with screens. So if you want to switch the heated seat on, for instance, if this was winter, let me just show you, you know, if you were kind of listening to the radio, you've got to go 1, 2, seat options, then heated screens. What would be wrong with a button just to press on and off? Just down on the side of the seat. Do you see what I mean? That's the only thing, it's just a bit laggy, it's a little bit laborious to go through the thing. That's what I will say. It does have shortcut buttons here, so if you want to go straight to home, you just press that little home button, it takes you straight to the home page. And there's one for car settings as well, so you press that, it goes straight to the car settings. Now the car has a lot of advanced driver assistance systems on it, so things like lane keep assist, you know, you want to take that on and off. It will always default on, so you've got to take it off. You know, you get stop start functionality, the shortcut shortcut buttons there, and then there's your functions there. So lane keep assist, stop start, automatic brake system, traction control, speed limit recognition, traffic sign recognition, blind spot alert, driver attention alert. They'll all come on, so you've got to go into that to switch them off if you don't like them. But as I say, at least it's only a couple of presses of the button away to get to that. So that's all I'll say about the screen. As I say, it's fine. It's, you know, it's up, it's in your line of sight. It doesn't interrupt your view across the windscreen, but it just feels a bit laborious to go through it. Okay, so that's my bugbear with that screen. What you've then got below is, okay, you've got a little shelf there that's got a kind of rubber tray in it, so you know you're popping your phone in it. I mean, my iPad's a bit too big for that, but you know, you can pop your keys in there or whatever. You know, they're not going to roll around and stuff. You know, sunglasses case, that type of thing. In fact, I've got my sunglasses case there. Here you go. You know, that can sit in there and that fits nicely. You know, that'll get filled up with junk before you know it. Certainly if it's anything like my wife's Grand Cherokee, it will do. So that's decent. So you've got that. There's a glove box over here, but as usual with a Stellantis group car, it's cut in half because obviously the fuse box is in the wrong place, and when they move the cars from left to right hand drive, they don't move the fuse box, and it means it cuts half the glove box off. Stupid. Don't know why they do that. Your climate control, whilst it's on the screen, you can adjust temperature and fan speed and aircon from here. So you do actually you don't have to use the screen to adjust temperature and your actual kind of fan speed. So that's quite good. I like the fact they've got those shortcut buttons. Same with the heated rear screen, maximum defrost and a maximum aircon. That's all done on like just buttons that are there. So excellent, really easy to get to. And a physical volume knob for the radio, your media. Yeah, so that's superb. Wireless charging pad down there for your phone. 2 USB ports in here, up at the front. Electronic park brake, and also your drive mode button here for changing your drive modes. There's storage here. That's what's bizarre, it's not in the back. You know, as I say, you've got, you know, enough for a water bottle and a coffee cup down in there, so that's fine, and that they can be adjusted for size. There's also a little, yeah, that's fairly decent. There's a, you know, it's not particularly, you know, long, but it's deep. You know, for chucking your Mars bars in, your Polo Mints or your Opal Fruits or whatever, they go in there. So that's okay for storage, and you get door bins. But why don't have them in the back? Don't know. There we go. The driving position, I'm going to talk more about the driving position when I drive it, because it's, if I'm being blunt about it, not giving the game away, that I haven't had a press car in, you know, 5 years of doing this job that has divided our household as much as this one. But I will talk about that a wee bit later on. But the driving position, it depends on your viewpoint, how you like it. It's all right. The relationship with the seat, the pedals and the steering wheel is fine. My issue comes with this. Now, the gear shift itself is quite nice and slick, but when I get the seat in the right position and the wheel in the right position, moving it from third to fourth, I bang my elbow on this. This just doesn't feel like the right sort of, I don't know, maybe it is just my driving position, but I find it quite, and it feels just a little bit too high for me. I kind of almost want it a little bit lower. That just feels like, you know, almost like the gear knobs, just that gear knob depth too high, if that makes sense. I'd rather, but then as I say, they've got this to bang my elbow against when I get the position right. So that's my bugbear with the driving position. The steering wheel is nice. It's pretty much round. There's a tiny bit flattened off at the bottom, not much. 3-spoke design, very clear physical buttons on the steering wheel. So for cruise control, you know, your distance guidance to the car in front, and then your media controls on this side, and the nice physical buttons. You know, the proper chunky buttons you got to press. Do like them. And again, the wheel's got a nice kind of turn to it, you know, it's not, you know, massive turn, kind of lock to lock. That's quite nice. And the same with the column stocks, they're positioned right at the space. If you drive like me, it's sort of like 9:15, then as I say, you know, flicking the indicators on or the wipers on isn't a problem. You look down into the binnacle, and it's a digital binnacle that the driver gets. You don't get a dial for your revs, you get a bar graph that goes up and down. The same with the fuel gauge. It's very clear, it's very crisp, everything you can read. As soon as you sort of like get used to that being what it is, it's very, very easy to sort of like read and very, very easy to see. So I don't really have a problem at all with that here. And also as well, you know, you can change things, you know, like the radio, it'll show you up on here what you're listening to. So rather than having to do it from there, you know, control it from here, but look there, you can see it from there. So I do quite like that. That's quite nice as well. And your steering wheel as well adjusts for reach and for rake, so that's good. You know, there's a good range of adjustment. Same with the seats. You know, you can adjust the seats for height. You know, they're manually adjustable, but you know, once you get them done, they're fine. And obviously backwards and forwards. And the seats themselves are quite comfortable. You know, there's good lateral support down the sides and obviously down the side of your thighs, which is decent. So, interior of the car, mixed bag. Most of it good. I like the design of it. I like the layout of it. That's a bit laborious, and I feel like some of the cheaper plastics do feel quite cheap. I'd like to have seen them be better quality. But the comfort's there, apart from this bit, which I'll talk about later. And there's a good amount of storage up front, although it's lacking in the rear. And you get a good amount of physical buttons, so everything is relatively easy to control and relatively easy to get your head around where things are. So on the whole, I would say it's certainly better up front than it is in the back. It's not perfect up here, but it's, you know, it's very good. It's very good. Let's just leave it at that. Yeah, decent. So here's where things go a little bit awry for me, if I'm honest with you. The engine, it's a 1.2 litre 3-cylinder. It's turbocharged, but it's a 1.2 litre 3-cylinder engine that produces just 100 brake horsepower and 205 newton meters of torque. It drives the front wheels through a 6-speed manual transmission. Now, you could say, well, it's a small car, Brian. It is, but it's not that small. 100 horsepower these days, you know, for a car that's got all the safety equipment and all the bits and pieces that this car has on it, you can feel it is only 100 brake horsepower. Now, if you go for the hybrid model, it is pretty much the same. It's the same power output. It just has electric. It's a mild hybrid. It has electrical assistance, you know, sort of, you know, to start it and to generate, you know, to the starter generators electrical, that type of thing. The 4xe model that's coming out has 4-wheel drive. That uses twin electric motors. That's 136 brake horsepower that's going to have, but it's the fully electric one that's the most powerful one of the range, and that's just over 150 brake horsepower with 260 newton meters of torque. Again, front wheel drive, but that to me is sort of like the benchmark of where this car needs to be. It doesn't need any less than that 150, and that's where I'm slightly disappointed underneath here, which we'll now talk about when we take the car out on the road. Now, this little 1.2 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged engine, let's discuss that. It produces just 100 horsepower and 205 newton meters of torque. And the reality is, it feels okay, actually. It feels pretty decent. I genuinely was expecting it to feel quite sluggish and very underpowered. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not exactly a firecracker. I mean, it's 50 horsepower down and 60 newton meters of torque down on the electric Avenger, and you do feel that. You can feel the difference, and there's no doubt in my mind about that whatsoever. And you've got to keep the kind of keep the revs up a little bit to get the kind of power there. You know, you've got to, yeah, you know, when you put your foot down in a higher gear, it just feels tiny little bit sluggish, but it gets up to speed and maintains its speed actually surprisingly well. I'm genuinely quite shocked. I thought it was going to be a lot worse than this. In terms of refinement, again, surprisingly, it's okay. The engine can be heard. You know, if I downshift there and put my foot down, yeah, you can hear it, but you know, it's not what you'd call noisy. It's not thrumming away at you, but nor is it quite kind of special. You know, it's not like the old sort of like Fiat 500 twin air, you know, that used to feel really quite special when you gunned that engine. It felt like it was going to throw a piston through the block, but then you'd upshift, and you know, that was it, and that was part of the fun with that engine. You're not going to drive this in sort of like, for its oral delight, let's just say that. But nor are you going to feel massively shortchanged by this. And I am very, very surprised about that, because I genuinely thought this is going to feel quite underpowered in comparison, you know, sort of like with what it should do for a car of this size. And it's not. Now, I want to talk about the gear shift, because that's my biggest bugbear. Not the shift itself, not the shift quality, because that's actually quite nice. It's quite smooth, it's quite slick. It's just the relationship of this, like the gear stick and this armrest here, and just my driving position. Now again, we're all different, we all sit in different places, but I just find I've got to kind of raise my arm into a slightly awkward position to make this work for me, you know, or you're always kind of banging your elbow, rubbing your elbow against this like this armrest. So that's the only thing for me that I do find not ideal. And again, you know, the seats are okay. Would I want to drive this 300 odd miles to see my mother in Scotland? I'm not sure is the honest answer. I'm not sure I would. I think it would do it, and I think it would do it fine. But if I had the choice of something else sat there on the driveway, I'd probably choose it first. I just feel that, you know, the seats, they're okay. They're fine for running around locally and for doing stuff. But I would think maybe on a longer drive, I think backache's going to set in. There just doesn't seem to be a huge amount of support down the lumbar region. That's my issue with it. In fact, there isn't a lumbar support on the seat at all. No, there isn't. That's it. There's no lumbar support. So that's something that I would find probably would start to irritate after a little while. But certainly in terms of sort of like the engine, the transmission, the way that it works, forget the position of the gear lever, it all works fine for me, and it's a genuine surprise. Now, there are different drive modes, believe it or not. You can have eco, normal, which is obviously its default setting, and sport. You know, I said to Liz the other day, why do you drive in sport? She said it just turns everything red. She said it doesn't do any difference. And in fairness, I have to sort of agree with her. I don't feel a massive difference between the normal and the sport. There isn't a huge sort of like difference between the two modes. There is a fourth mode called sand, which I'm not sure what that does, but I'm thinking that what it will do is give you a little bit more prodigious use of the throttle pedal. You know, so if you're on a sort of like a loose surface, you know, you're pulling off a kind of sandy car park, you go down to Cornwall, you kind of park sometimes on the beach, that type of thing. I would think it's going to be something for use there, rather than for actually sort of like chasing across sand dunes. It's not that style of car. Visibility is good. I'm driving up the motorway at the moment. You know, I've got good visibility. The door mirrors, you know, they're actually quite big on the car. I get good view behind me. Over the shoulder visibility is all right. The C-pillar is slightly thick, but it's not too bad. Depending again on your driving position, you can sit fairly high up in the car. You only really notice how small the car is when you're alongside, say, like a larger SUV. Like there's a Kia Sorento in front of me. When you're alongside him, you can feel that, you know, he has a much taller driving position. But actually, in fairness, the car itself doesn't feel like a small, underpowered Super Mini, you know, on the motorway, and that's a good thing. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that I think the electric one is the better drivetrain to have with this car, but I am surprised at how well this little 100 horsepower engine is coping with it. I didn't think it was going to be as good as this, and actually surprisingly it is. Now obviously the car is designed to be a little bit more kind of urban centric, as I'm sure, you know, anybody in marketing will probably want me to sort of like say, you know, for roundabout town and for easy parking. And for that, what you do have is a really sort of like nice steering. You know, it's quite light. It's not vague. You know where the kind of wheels are pointing. So as soon as you turn it, the car does actually move. So it's got quite nice weighting behind the steering itself. So that's okay. Brakes are good. There's a difference I always find with the Stellantis cars is on the electric cars, there's always this deadness at the top of the pedal that you've got to push through before the actual sort of like brakes start to work. And thankfully you don't have that in the combustion engine cars. it's not there. So actually the brakes do work quite well on it. So on the whole, I have to say that this is quite a surprising little car. Where I thought it would struggle with the power and sort of like, you know, out on the open road a little bit more, it doesn't. And that's the bit that's really surprised me. I'm surprised that it's not the sort of like, you know, the slightly underpowered car that I thought it was going to be. It's actually quite pleasant. The only downside I feel is, as I say, that gear stick just doesn't feel right for me, and that would be relieved with the choice of an automatic. But you can't have the automatic unless you go for the hybrid or the fully electric model. That's the only way that you can get an automatic gearbox in the car. Other than that, it's all right. Oh, I didn't mention ride quality. Ride quality is actually quite good. Quite like the ride quality of the car. Yeah, it's not bad at all. It, you know, it goes along the road quite well. It doesn't crash into potholes. I mean, they're 18-inch wheels, but the tyre profile is quite decent and quite big. So ride quality wise, you know, it will handle pretty much anything that you're going to throw at the car, I would suggest. Yeah, I like it. And as I say, I'm sort of surprised that I do. I'm surprised. No, I'm not surprised I like it, because I like the Avenger. I think the Avenger's a great car. But I'm surprised I like this one as much as I do. That's what I meant to say. Yeah, there we go. Right, let's talk about price now. So in terms of price, we're just going to talk about the petrol engine car, although I will mention the other ones as well a bit later on. Effectively, you've got three models in the range. You start the range off with the Longitude model, which is £23,859. A very reasonable amount of money, I think, for the type of car that you're getting. In some respects, you know, the small kind of B segment SUV. I don't think that's bad value for money at all. If you want a better spec, then you move up to the Altitude. Now that's going to be £25,559, and then you crest out, if you'll pardon the pun, with the Summit model, the top of the range one, and that's £27,759. Now they're all the same engine in terms of that 1.2 litre 3-cylinder turbo. It's just the spec variants that you get between those three. You can't have them with other. It's not like the Summit gets a 1.6 litre engine, for instance. You can, however, obviously have those three models with the hybrid system, but bear in mind it's the same power and torque, so it's no more powerful than that. It just has slightly better efficiency in terms of the way it runs its engine. If you want the hybrid model, then you're roughly adding on around about £1,800 onto those prices to get the hybrid. If you do want to go fully electric, then your premium then is about £10,000 over those prices. And if you think, well, that's a big premium to go for electric, it is in some respects, but in fairness, where it actually positions the car in this sort of like the electrified B segment SUV arena is about right. They all start at around about the sort of like the early 30,000s and go up to sort of like late 30,000s. So it's not really that expensive. It just sounds like a big premium to pay for the electric model over the standard petrol model. But in some respects, I think it's probably worth it. So as I said, the B segment SUV market in Europe is huge. 1 in 5 new cars sold today is a car like this. So what other crossovers might you consider if you were looking at this? Well, there's obviously the main competition is coming from within the Stellantis group. It's band of brothers, if you like, with cars such as the Fiat 600, the Vauxhall Mokka, the Peugeot E2008 or /E 2008. You know, cars like that. That's the cars that it really competes with, because it shares its platform and a lot of componentry with those vehicles as well. From the Far East, then you're going to be looking maybe at things such as maybe the Hyundai Kona. Probably not the Kia Niro. It's probably a slightly bigger car, in fairness, in terms of its price and its physical size. But the Kona is probably quite close to it. Maybe something like a Yaris Cross from Toyota. That's a car that's been quite popular. That's maybe a car that you would certainly look at. And of course, it offers hybridisation as well, if not a fully electric drivetrain. So that's certainly a car to think about. The higher up model, then maybe even sort of like the Lexus compatriot to that, the LBX, which is a car we're going to be featuring on the channel very, very soon as well. So maybe you might also also consider it with that. But I'm not sure a Lexus customer and a Jeep customer maybe are the same. I don't know. I might be wrong with that. Ford, of course, have got the Puma, which is a massive seller, and that's a car that sits in this segment very, very well. And whilst they say the Jeep certainly looks a bit more kind of rugged and a bit more kind of outdoorsy than the Puma's a very, very popular car, and of course it comes from a brand such as Ford. So it's those style of cars that you're probably going to be looking at if you're out in the market space and you're starting to think that maybe you want to look at the Avenger. Those are the cars you might also want to consider too. In all the time that I've done this job, I've never known a car to divide our house like this one has. There was a part of me when the Jeep Avenger came that I wanted to give it to my partner Liz, because the Grand Cherokee's really much her car. She drives it more often than not. She's a real Jeep fan. It's her second Grand Cherokee. She absolutely adores them. She loves the brand. She loves everything it stands for. And I thought it'd be really interesting to get her take on what this new Jeep was like. So I gave it to her and said, you drive that and tell me what you think. And she hated it. She said likes the way it looks. She said it does look like a Jeep, but she says in all other respects, she says it's just not for me. She said it's underpowered, the interior feels cheap, she said it doesn't feel as robust as I want a Jeep to feel. She says I genuinely didn't get the feeling that it was me. She said it felt a bit fake, was the exact words. And in many ways, I thought she was going to be a little bit correct with that, because when I saw the power and the torque figures myself, I thought, oh, that's going to be a bit challenging. Now, I've driven the Avenger, the electric Avenger on AutoEV, and I love that car. I think it's a brilliant car. And I was really concerned about whether or not this little 1.2 litre 3-cylinder engine was going to be enough for it. And then I realised that actually what I'd done was wrong. This car was never going to appeal to a current Jeep owner in many ways. This car is designed to appeal to people who are new to Jeep, to people who may have gone and bought a Nissan or a Toyota or a Renault or a little Peugeot or whatever. It's designed to draw new people into the brand. And that was my mistake by giving it to someone like Liz. Of course it's not going to drive like a big 3-litre turbo diesel Grand Cherokee. Gun to my head, I still think the electric Avenger is the one to have, but I do appreciate that it is a lot more expensive. You know, it starts at over £30,000. So if you're not really got that sort of budget, and you are interested in maybe looking at what the Jeep brand has to offer, then I have to say this is a surprisingly good little car. I like it. Yes, it doesn't feel particularly quick, and I do agree with Liz, in some respects the interior does feel a little bit cheap, even over the electric Avenger that I drove last year. It doesn't feel quite as good as that car. I don't know, I think you've got to go up the model range to get something that feels a bit more kind of Jeep-like in some respects. But if you're running around town and you just need a small car that's going to have low running costs, that's easy to see out of, that's easy to drive and easy to manoeuvre and easy to park, then this is a surprisingly good little car. And I think it's a welcome addition to the Jeep range. Thank you for watching another new car review on House of Cars. As always, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Then once you've done that, press the little bell button that's down below, because that's the way you get notified of when our next video is uploaded and it's gone live. If you have enjoyed the video, then make sure you give it a thumbs up, and don't forget, put your comments and your thoughts down below. Are you a current Jeep owner? Does the Avenger appeal to you? Do you have an Avenger? Have this your first Jeep? Have you bought it as a second Jeep? What did you buy, the electric one, the petrol one? Let me know down below your thoughts. Now, we're across on Instagram as well, so at House of Cars 1973, so give us a follow there as well, because that does help the channel. If you're into electric cars, then make sure you're following at AutoEV, because that's my electric car channel, so all the electric cars that I review are across on AutoEV. If you're on House of Cars, then it's stuff that's powered by petrol or hybrids or diesels, so make sure you follow AutoEV for all things electric. If it's new cars, if it's a classic car, if it's an old car, it's a new car, it's a small car, it's a big car, it's a sports car, it's a slow car, you're going to find it on House of Cars. Thank you for supporting me, and thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon.